Reporting from the Oklahoma State Building here in Oklahoma City, Midwest America. I am Charles Ebune and this is GLOBEWATCH Oklahoma City. In 1995, Oklahoma was the seat of America's worst homegrown terrorism act, which killed many and wounded several others. If you know Oklahoma across the world just because of the 1995 terrorist attack, probably you are on the wrong side of history, because this place is host to one of the most important Native American community in the United States of America. In Cameroon, you will refer them as the Mbororos, or if you like, the Pygmies, what we simply call the original indigenes of what constitutes today the United States of America. Their contribution throughout history has been dramatic and pragmatic. So, just what is the place and contribution of Native Americans in the realization of the American dream today? My guest is one of them. DJ Smalling, welcome to GLOBEWATCH.
Charles, it's a pleasure to be on here, and I love the fact that that get to talk a little bit about my time and get to express time with a Cameroonian. Yes, it's a pleasure.
I just want to inquire from you first.
Yes.
To our global audience, when you talk of Native Americans,
Yes.
who are we talking about?
The First Nations that were here before contact, before the Europeans and the colonial powers moved into this part of the world. So we're talking about, in the United States, it's over 536 recognized tribal nations. And in our Constitution, we are viewed as that, as independent sovereign nations. And so right now, in Canada, there are over 634, I believe it is. And so there's large numbers of languages, large numbers of people that have been consistent. And so we are persistent in our identity, not in the sense that we're antagonistic to anyone. This is just who we are. This is what we've always been. And we're not immigrants.
Okay. You are not immigrants. You have stayed here for so many years.
Yes.
And I understand that in this particular state of Oklahoma, and
Yes.
here in Oklahoma City in particular,
Yes.
there are about plus 30 of such tribes.
That's right, 39.
Which one of those tribes do you belong to?
I belong to the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
You belong to the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
And as a matter of fact, the word, our state, Oklahoma, is a Choctaw phrase, which means land of the red man.
One of the fears is, of course, tied to the history of the slave trade. It's when the colonizers came in the Americas, realized that they could not use the Red Indians, the Native Americans, to open up the sugarcane plantations.
That's right.
That is how Bishop Bartolomeo de las Casas advised colonizers to get people from Africa to come and work in this country, leading to the influence of my great-grandfathers and whatsoever you can imagine from the other side of the Atlantic.
Absolutely.
What makes Native Americans special and unique? What are their characteristics that made the founding fathers of this nation to fear them?
We're fiercely independent. We are not a people that's easily broken. It's been 500 years of assault, 500 years of influence, but our language persists, our identity persists. If you have become a Christian and you're looking at the 10 Commandments and it says that you must honor your family, honor your mother and father, it means honor your line, honor your families. Well, all of our families came here to be sovereign. So if we're going to honor them, we must have an attitude that wants sovereignty. If you're a traditionalist, same thing applies. We have to honor our family's decision to come here. They came here to be free. They came here to be independent. They came here to maintain our identity. That's what makes this place a little bit more aggressive.
This nation is made up of Black Americans,
Yes.
Hispanics, Spanish population, Portuguese Americans,
Absolutely.
Europeans, and many other areas across the world.
Absolutely.
What percentage of the American population is made up of Native Americans
Around
today?
2. We are a very small population as throughout the United States at large. In Oklahoma, it's closer to 25%. So it's a very different place here in Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma, not only is the small population much larger than the rest of the than where you find in other states, but we're economically much more powerful.
Economically much powerful, but we don't see that from the external world. The external world is that Native Americans have been marginalized. We don't see them in top American international business transactions, political organizations. How much of the economy do you hold? How much of the military do you hold? And how much of the educational percentage of this country do you hold? In a sentence, what is the contribution of Native Americans in the American dream?
That is a very fascinating question because up until quite recently, we weren't a part of that dream. We were the object of the dream's scorn. We were the reminder, a living reminder of what that dream destroyed. And so our participation in this dream is very recent. And we're participating on our own terms. Our American dream isn't our dream at all. The American dream to us is a nightmare. No one holds the military, number one. Uh, the, the military of the United States is wholly subordinate to the United States. If you're talking about composites of
Yeah,
persons,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
okay. Within that, the American Indian community or the Native American community, they enlist higher than any other composite of the United States at over 1 out of 10, whereas in everybody else, it's 1 out of 150. And so that participation is consistent with very high numbers of representations in your special operations and special forces of upwards to 30%. We're 2% of the country's population, but we're 30% of the best fighters in the world. I mean, that says a lot. Now, when it comes to where we do our business, it depends. Like you're looking at defense contracting, my tribe is the largest minority-owned defense contractor in the world. And so, yes, we're a very big force to be reckoned with what we do in our defense.
When you look at the American economic mantle, Coca-Cola, JP Morgan, Chevron,
Yeah.
ExxonMobil,
Yeah.
IBM, and many others, how many of those companies can we find Native Americans managing them?
Very few. Because up to now, as you know historically, the American dream was a dream for very few people. The American dream was not this 1950s everybody had it sort of illusion. The American dream was and is and persists to be fanciful. And so when you look at where Indian country is today and where Native Americans are today, it needs to be understood that we have been excluded historically. However, where you do see we get opportunity, like in gaming and casinos, which are a major business in the world, they're massive, a massive industry in the world. Um, we have become a dominant force in this internationally, only because, and it's not because we have some sort of natural affinity to gaming or casinos. No bank in Oklahoma, no bank in the United States would lend us money. So we had internationals who helped get us started. Out of that, internationally, Oklahoma is now the 4th largest gaming market in the world, and we have dominated where we've
Let us
gone.
just turn to that direction. Look with me together towards
Yeah,
that
I
direction.
know.
You look at that building, it is the Chevron headquarters. Devon, I beg your
Yeah.
pardon. Devon headquarters.
That's right.
That is the tallest building
In Oklahoma.
in 3 states.
That's right.
Texas, Kansas, and Oklahoma combined.
Absolutely.
It is a 50-story building.
That's right.
When you look at your economic position in the United States of America today, you say there has been a leap forward.
And guess what? That building, that enterprise is wholly owned by a family, and the heirs are Choctaw.
Do you think that modernization, globalization, has destroyed your traditional values?
No, because I don't believe it was any kind of movement. I think it was individuals. It was not isms that did anything. It was people with great greed, great malice, and intent to genocide who did it. We're all the Choctaws. Like for instance, one of our greatest criticisms, even amongst our other tribes, is that we, by ethic and by identity, are always about appropriating things. That's what we've always been known for. We find something that's good, we find something that's better, we use that. We're, and that is a part of our national character. We're highly aggressive, highly competitive people, and we look for what is a competitive advantage. That's not a modernity thing. That pre-existed the advent of the Europeans here. Now, you present me new technologies, new tools, and new, facilities that make things more elegant and much more logical, or they, cut down time. Our national character as Choctaws is we take it, we make it our own. Now, when you have people who come in and exploit based upon artificial advantages, that's where we have the problem.
Okay. You and I are standing, it is just these trees that are covering the exact site of the 1995 Oklahoma terrorist bombings.
That's right.
The worst act of homegrown terrorism in the United States of America,
That's right.
April 19, 1995. You were at that particular place in 1995.
That's right. That's where I used to work, and on that day, I was getting ready for exams in university, and so where I usually parked, it was rubble, and afterwards I was a part of a triage.
This is a nation where the gun culture is rampant. And here in Oklahoma, where you and I are sitting in particular, it is a very conservative society
Extremely.
where if you say, Barack Obama says that please let us draft a bill to curtail the ownership of guns in this country, they will
Oh,
simply
you're gonna
tell
have
him,
problems here.
they will tell him, Mr. President, you are talking trash, you are talking nonsense.
You're lucky if they say it that nicely.
You used to be an arms dealer,
Not arms dealer. I was worked in the defense industry.
defense
Yes.
industry,
Yes.
where arms were sold.
Well, the arms are always being sold. I was on the think tank side.
Okay. Terrorism is a major threat to global security and national securities
Yes.
across the world today. You have worked in that world of arms.
Mm-hmm.
How do terrorist organizations end up having sophisticated weapons? Who sells weapons to them?
Again, I go back to what your original question was about modernity and who I was illustrating. There's always going to be people who who have no conscience, who are amoral, who have no compunction about making money and exploiting disproportionate advantage of their situation. Just because you have access to weapons or access to technologies, access to know-how, doesn't mean you need to sell them. And so you have nations who do it, you have individuals who do it, and that becomes problematic. In that sense, not having any real ability of having institutional judicial teeth out there, of course, to actually go after them, well, there's a problem. Ultimately, it's never going to be about the access of people's to tools of violence until those core issues that persist, that force them in their own minds, good, bad, and different, to where they feel like the only option they have is to fight, until those issues that tend to be legitimate issues of justice are dealt with. You can mitigate all the weapons you want, but it doesn't mean that the problem's been taken care of.
Let me come back to the middle of the issue.
Mhm.
Native Americans
Mhm.
can go into deals with foreign nations,
Yes.
United Kingdom, Spain, Cameroon.
Mhm.
The US Constitution says that it is the sole responsibility of the US government to enter into foreign treaties.
Mhm.
Are you a state within a state or a nation within a state?
That is a very well put question. We are nations. That's why we're able to exercise those treaty privileges. If we were a province, such as Oklahoma, only the United States could do it because Oklahoma is a composite of the United States. But we're not. We're a priori. That status exists there. And so the United States has extraordinary plenary power. Extraordinary plenary power. However, we've only been able to push those boundaries recently. And so the fact that we still have those relationships ongoing and active after hundreds of years, some of those even preceding the creation of the United States, and still active, is a testament to it.
And Nixon gave you guys
Really?
extraordinary educational
Oh my
opportunities through
gosh.
the
And then recognize.
1971
Yeah.
Native American Education Act.
Well, it was the Indian Self-Governance and Education Act.
Act.
It recognized not only our right to self-governance, it recognized also our right to educate ourselves. And the reason why the education was so important was there had been a standard federal practice, a colonial practice, of taking students from their families and their homelands, removing them to another part of the United States where they're completely separated from everyone they know, or even looks like where they're from, and they were beaten and they were starved if they spoke their language. So this was happening with my grandparents, my parents' generation.
Okay. Let me take the discussion personal.
Hmm.
You are someone who knows Cameroon so well. The
And
1980
loves Cameroon
and
very
loves
well.
Cameroon. The 1984 failed attempt to overthrow President Biya, you witnessed it. I did not witness it because I was yet to be born.
I was a young,
You were
I
about
was a punk,
nine years
I was a
old.
punk kid.
Yeah. How did you arrive in Cameroon?
My parents worked for an NGO, and at that time we moved from Lausanne, Switzerland, to Douala, and it was during that time period. And as you know, it was a very tense period to be in Central Africa anyway, regardless of that situation, because it was at the height of the Cold War in Africa. You had Angola to the south, you had Chad to the north, you had Equatorial Guinea, which was just emerging from those years, 13 years of their civil war. It was a very chaotic time. It was less than 10 years after the war with Nigeria for the border.
Yeah.
So things were
The
tense.
Biafran War.
Yeah, it was tense. It was incredibly tense. And, um, that as a boy, going to the schools that I did and knowing the people that we just knew, um, and always being curious. I was on my bike going around the military installations. I was going on my bike everywhere around the gendarmes and trying to understand this new world that I was in. And as a boy, I I never felt threatened. I had great curiosity and I'd seen that the adults indulged me.
What struck you most in Douala, where you lived for a while, and what struck you most in Yaoundé?
And honestly, my time in Cameroon, as well like my time in South Africa later on, I have to liken to Dickens' book where he goes, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It really showed the best of men and the worst of men. Showed the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. But not in some egregious warlike situation, but where you would see people taking care of each other or see people extorting
What
each
did
other.
you like in Douala in particular, which is
Oh,
the New York of
yeah,
Cameroon?
absolutely. I enjoyed the energy of Douala. I mean, you can't be in Douala if you don't like noise, if you don't like chaos, if you don't like people uh, always trying to sell something. Everywhere you go, in any
The
industry,
traditions didn't
it's
shock
just
you?
like,
The traditional ruler of
no,
Douala didn't have an impact on you?
absolutely. I mean, uh, the most poignant cultural interactions were with a friend of mine's family, who are quite a powerful family in Cameroon, whose grandfather was one of the kings of a tribe there, and getting to know those traditions. But it was very funny because or I should say, it was curious that my grandfathers here, the native family, were happy that I was in Cameroon. They were happy I was living in a place where tribes were as strong as they are there. They wanted me around that. They wanted my mind and my heart and my worldview to be informed by the root of how a family can be, the strength of your collective, which is not a very American idea. But we're not Americans. We're Native Americans. We're the first Americans. And so we're much more. So being there, I loved the strength of the communities. I liked how people took care of themselves.
Okay. You and I spoke off mic, and you told me that the Cameroonian president, Paul Biya, taught you real politics,
Ho, ho, ho.
how the world functions.
Wow. You want, yeah,
How can Americans say that?
it's a respect. He is a genius in the sense of he is exactly, he is exactly like the, the, the apex of what Machiavelli would be talking about in The Prince. He is and I don't mean this in any disparaging way, it's an expression that we have in the United States. He's a political animal. It is his natural habitat, and he happens to be a lion. He is a fierce and cunning lion in that sense, and it is folly for people to think that he's weak, because he's not. It's folly for people, whether you like him or don't not. This is irrelevant. If you don't respect someone first, you'll never appreciate their
What
capacities
that
and what they
person
do.
does.
And I learned very quickly, that this person had undertaken a very extraordinary task. And that was, he was determined to keep all these different tribes, all these different languages, all these different religions, all these different peoples in a new country. He was determined to forge them out an independent place, pitting the Chinese versus the Americans versus, the French versus whoever else decided to venture into his area. He was willing to play Marshal Tito. He was willing, and this is a very interesting point, because the earliest memories that I have of a world leader addressing China, the People's Republic of China, as a growing, emerging people, was evidenced by Paul Biya and the People's Congress being built by the Chinese in Cameroon.
In
And then
Yaoundé.
later on, the roads and these sort of projects. No one else was doing that. No one else was acknowledging that.
This is a country you told me that you have at your heart and
Mm,
in your heart.
a great love for the place.
Sure, the situation in Cameroon in the 1980s when you were there, 1984, 85, was chaotic with
Mm-hmm.
an abortive military takeover. It is almost the same today with the Boko Haram
Yeah.
insurgency.
Mm-hmm.
Are you afraid of the future of Cameroon when terrorism enters?
My fear for Cameroon is that someone amongst the multiplicities of the identities that make up Cameroon will exploit short-term advantage for long-term devastation. Meaning that a few groups will seek their own ends at the cost of everyone else's peace. That's my concern. I know that Cameroon has a tremendous internal capacity for judiciary, for governance, and it will be the strength of your republic that does it. It's your strength of your republic that will either make you fall or, prevail.
Or prevail?
It will not be an individual in the future. It will, because Biya is an old man. At that point, it falls upon every Cameroonian who is a citizen of the Republic to be a citizen.
DJ Smalling, thanks very much indeed for being guest on GlobeWatch from
And thank you
Cameroon
for coming to
Television.
Oklahoma.
You are welcome.
Yeah.
We are hoping to see you in Cameroon.
I would love to come to Cameroon again.
Thank you.
Yeah.